And the topic for today's webinar is advertisement and privacy compliance in 2023. So you might have seen that a lot of data privacy laws have been rolling out in different jurisdictions, different geographies around the world. And it has been more of an important aspect for businesses and organizations, not just to comply with it, but also to make sure that they are using privacy as a business enabler, which is why we went on and picked up this topic around advertisement and privacy compliance to have two of the, one of the best industry experts in the privacy domain, Raj and Rahul, also share their insights and also share what Exterro can do as an organization. And this is a joint discussion, a joint webinar between Tsaaro and Exterro. A little bit about Tsaaro. I'll just take this up, guys. Tsaaro, of course, we are a data protection consulting firm based out of India and Europe. We are primarily helping organizations improve their security and privacy posture. A lot of work that we do is also around security and privacy compliance, apart from the core technical and technical security and privacy implementations we do. And Raj, I would also hand it over to you if you can share a bit about Exterro and what Exterro does as an organization.
Sure, Krishna, thank you. So I hope I'm audible to everyone. Good afternoon. So I'm from Exterro. Exterro is a leading legal GRC software company. So we are not just a data privacy software company as a whole. We are a legal GRC provider. I would like to call it as a unified legal GRC platform where we touch upon all the problems that starts with legal e-discovery, data privacy, and cyber compliance, and also digital forensics and incident response. So with just a single software, we touch upon all these four major areas that creates bugging issues with most of the corporate agencies and also law enforcement agencies. So we are headquartered in US, Portland, Oregon, with 4 different offices in US, and we have a couple of offices in India as well.
Sure. Thank you, Raj. Thank you for that introduction. I'll just hand it over to you again, Raj. If you could also introduce yourself and your role at the organization, then we'll just go on to Rahul and probably me too. So over to you again.
Sure, definitely. So I'm Raj Kumar Manikam. I'm the Regional Director of Sales for the South Asian region, based out of Exterro's Coimbatore office. We call it as Cotton City office. And I've been with this organization for the last 4.5 years.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you for that introduction. Rahul, I would hand it over to you if you could also introduce yourself.
Sure, Krishna, and thank you, Tsaaro and Exterro, for the opportunity. So one of my roles is working as Senior Privacy Advisor for Exterro, but full-time, I also run cybersecurity and data protection policy consulting firm called The Perspective and Grey Days Private Limited. Through that, we work on areas of technology policy, cybersecurity strategy, data protection, and cyber insurance compliance for our organization. And I have about 11 years of industry experience, particularly in space of information security and data protection. Prior to this, I had the opportunity to work at Data Security Council of India, leading their privacy certification. I co-authored the certifications.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for that introduction as well. And a little bit about me. My name is Krishna, and I head the security and compliance practice here at Tsaaro. A lot of work that we do is also around helping end-to-end security implementation and privacy implementation for organizations. Short disclaimer before we begin and talk about a lot of privacy knowledge areas, that, of course, whatever we talk about here is purely something that does not represent our organization. It is just for the sake of sharing that information, sharing our personal experience on what we have seen around the industry. None of this should be constituted as legal advice. So the agenda for today, we'll start with privacy concerns with advertising. This is basically how modern society views privacy as one of the detriments when it comes to advertising or targeted advertising specifically, right? So this is one of the key areas that you would easily correlate privacy to. Then we have the statutory requirements around geographic specific requirements or location specific requirements. We will talk of the benefits of a privacy-centric approach, not just from a perspective that we are trying to demonstrate compliance, but also how we can use it in your business as a strategy to gain advantage over your competitors. Something that I usually talk about a lot is probably Apple, on how Apple uses privacy as one of their business differentiators. And then we'll talk a bit about Exterro as well and what the Exterro tool does and could help you in implementation of the Indian bill that is due probably sometime this year, hopefully. And at the same time, the bills that are coming up in Saudi Arabia, as well as different areas of the world. So before we even start, which of these data types matter the most to you? Personally, which of these data types, if exposed, would cause you the most harm? Okay, so I think biometric data is the clear winner here. I see that a lot of people feel that biometric data definitely matters the most to them. So Rahul, I'll hand it over to you. If you can also start with a quick introduction about personal data and the different data types.
So, on personal data. So, any data which relates to an individual is a personal data. And any data which uniquely identifies individual becomes personally identifiable information. So all the activities, all the transactions, the attributes, the descriptions about the individual, everything comes under the larger ambit of personal data. Various laws and regulations try and demarcate them into various subcategories. For one is ease of governance, clearly highlighting what data parts are most sensitive in this, require more protection from misuse and abuse. What are the additional procedures and policies that need to be applied to secure data which can cause more harm to the users? And that segmentations continue to trade in different geographies, different laws and regulations try and define them differently. But there appears to be like some sort of common consensus if you look at the laws across the world, the GDPR, that we have like close to about 130 countries now have data protection law in some form. So you'll see them addressing personal data with this definition that any data belonging to an individual becomes personal data, and then they categorize sensitive information. Definition of sensitive personal data expanded and contracted a bit. So like the passwords which were part of the IT Act XPDI was removed. However, your political opinions and beliefs, your religious affiliations, etc., like those got mentioned. Interestingly, like those were also the sensitive personal information which was mentioned in the GDPR, and many US state laws, including the recent ones we are seeing in California, Virginia, Colorado, Connecticut, they all mention about these information types which are sensitive in nature. They also include, for example, geolocation data, which is not explicitly mentioned in our draft laws. And in the Indian context, the latest version of the data protection bill attempted to not categorize personal information into other segments like what is sensitive or what is critical, which was there in the previous version. And the primary reason is they thought that that will not only increase the burden of how this needs to be operationalized from an organization viewpoint, because then you need to have different controls and policy elements that you need to apply for different data types. And since organizations operate on a pretty large data sets, and it's very difficult to define and categorize what comes exactly in sensitive at what point of time and what gets converted to a normal PI. So we see different approaches for defining personal data, what is sensitive data. Even the ISO standards has like come up with the definition of what is personal data and what are the elements that could be sensitive personal data, etc.
Right.
So Krishna,
Rahul, we'll also take up one of the questions in the chat section and I'll direct it to you as well. There's a question from Ajay. And Ajay wants to know whether recording of only body temperature is personal data or not.
Absolutely, it is. Your body temperature is also your personal data because it is one of the attributes that you carry. So
that's right.
It is definitely your personal information.
So I think, Rahul, I also have a follow-up question on that. This is something that was doing the rounds in our internal Tsaaro WhatsApp group. One of my colleagues had a question whether skin type and hair type can be considered as sensitive personal information. So what is your take on this? Because I saw a post on LinkedIn which had this question, and everyone had their own different reasons on why it should be considered as sensitive data or why it shouldn't be. So just wanted to understand your perspective on whether it should be sensitive or not.
It is definitely a personal information, but whether it is to be categorized as sensitive or not is a regulatory call. Personally, I think if it leads to discrimination or harm against user, then it should categorize as sensitive. However, in the larger context, I think it should be a personal information.
Right. I think that was also the case that we discussed and also agreed on. Right. So I think moving on to privacy concerns with advertising, Rahul, what are your takes on how can people understand the privacy nuances around certain ad tech organizations. Now, we are not only focusing on advertisement organizations, but we're focusing on any organization that does any kind of digital advertising.
This coming from a viewpoint that I am not a practitioner of undertaking this privacy advertising campaigns and designing this, but from the subject matter and theory viewpoint. Since the advent of the internet, I mean, the advertisement model has been its core on how things function. So all the websites, all the blogs, all the apps, they rely, because that's a basic revenue model, because you're accessing these websites for essentially free. Like you're getting access to the web page or the content, but you can like pay more for additional services or subscribe to them. But additional, what is the basic revenue that the organization earns when a user visits their website? It is through the advertisements. And over the years, we have seen on how things have changed. So earlier, which started with like simply first-party cookies, and then came in the era of third-party cookies and the overload and everything we were overburdened with. We could see at the start of the webinar, you mentioned about this feeling of creepiness. Now, since we're moving from the era of first to third-party cookies, and now we're sort of moving towards a Web3 cookieless environment, although like it's not yet there unveiled, but over time we'll see more versions of it coming. Because the purpose of basic purpose of advertising is to design a successful ad campaign, and you get access to the various information of users. You then do the segmentation of users, and then you find the lookalike audience, and then you throw up relevant ads. But that data shouldn't be used to stereotype people or use against them for targeted harm, because that's clearly a no-no. You sign up to a platform, and then you provide consent to the terms and conditions that that data can be used. But that specific targeted advertising is not one of the explicit consent which the users grants. But Meta relied that that it was contingent on the contractual necessity for providing services on advertising. They were it went on different stages, from the Irish DPA to the European Data Protection Board to further deciding on this matter. And the concern was that since the regulations have sort of evolved to a level, the application of policy and regulatory guidelines need to be very granular and specific on how they're applied in the operational context for how the organization functions. However, the EDPB was of the opinion that the organizations can't rely on contractual necessity for behavioral advertising.
Rahul, on top of it, I think now that we have discussed this section, I have a specific question for the audience as well. We'll get over to that question, but I'll just want the audience to also share their responses on what they understand. So there's a question. This is for the attendees, of course. Identify which of the following is a statutory requirement that must be there to buy an advertising company, right? Or any organization that advertises. What are some of the statutory requirements in terms of GDPR or maybe any other law that comes to your mind, and on what are the specific requirements that this organization needs to follow? Appointing a DPO, appointing a DPO is not mandatory for every data privacy law. There are only specific laws that talk about actually appointing a DPO. And then even then, when you are appointing a DPO, there could be certain conditions that an organization needs to fulfill to even consider appointing a DPO, right? So okay, fair to see that a lot of the people who have joined us are working in the privacy industry, apparently. So it's good to see that all of them is a popular choice today. Now, let's talk a bit more about, just a high level overview of the different statutory requirements, because that was also the topic that you were covering. So in terms of the different sections, I think I would also move this over to Raj as well. If Raj could share his opinion on the different statutory requirements that he has come across, specifically because Exterro is working in different jurisdictions. So there may be different challenges that you have faced, Raj. So what is your opinion on the statutory requirements around data privacy, and how can we fulfill that as an organization or as a privacy professional?
So talking about the different statutory requirements, I would like to, looking at everything, I would like to just take upon the consent and the data minimization thing. Talking about concern, when Rahul was stating some time back, so we are moving away from the cookie world, and most of the organizations, in terms of getting adhered to the meeting their statutory requirements, the way how they are collecting the concerns from the users, so they should also be giving in terms of modifying the preferences, how it could be modified. For example, I'm giving my data to a company that would want to market their product to me. So today I'm interested, when I look at their brand, I get attracted and I just click okay, or I just fill a form and say that okay, I would like to know more about your future products or your future offers and discounts and anything, whatever is going on. But they get they keep bombarding me with their emails, WhatsApp texts and everything. I just get pissed off at some point of time. I just want to remove the preferences. The company should be giving me an option in terms of where I can manage my preferences. And in case if they're not providing that option, then which means that it is not good. So again, in that case, I don't know how organizations can manage that without the help of technology. So that's where organizations like Exterro, there are a lot of organizations across the globe. So that's where company comes into play, and we make sure that once you get concerns and how those concerns and preferences are managed, and whenever they want to revoke their concern or modify their preferences, then that goes into the play. And talking about data minimization, the major issue that when I talk to people, when we keep talking to not just me, most of my colleagues in the sales and consulting team, when they talk to organizations, the major issue that they hear from organizations is they don't know what they hold within the organization. Very sad truth. 5 years, for example, for health records in Germany, the same health standards in Italy would be different, right? So a technology or maybe a software or whatever the way you're managing, the organization is managing, it should help them in terms of modifying or managing the minimization process. So I would just leave the other areas of transparency and purpose limitation, everything. Rahul, you're more expert in this, so I would just want you to touch upon other areas. Also, please share your thoughts about concerns and minimization as well.
All right. So I think Raj clearly explained on how it is the onus is on the organizations to get their house in order to prove that they are doing the right things. It's not that you shouldn't be deceptive about the data collection, even if by taking consent, by hiding it behind the layers and layers of the terms and conditions, you make user simply accept the privacy policy, even to enable targeted advertising. I think you still can't hide behind it, and that is the fact that has led to the regulators getting more and more active and starting organizations to put the basic ethics and the basic data protection principles in place when it comes to providing targeted advertising. Even if a user has given certain indication, there was this question on right to opt in or opt out. If a user does not want to be targeted with their own personal information, they don't want personalized ad to be served, I think that right clearly should be reserved with the user. But I think there is also this thing that since this is the large companies, the big tech companies which are coming under the fines, or small companies are like, we can pretty much go about because we are not under the regulatory radar of what's happening. I think that's not the case. Once the regulators are done with the big tech firms, it is the small firms also they're going to come after and look at their practices specifically on what are the emerging standards and how they use information for various purposes.
Before even that, I just want to post out a question to everyone again. What do you think are the benefits of adopting a privacy-centric approach? Some of them we have discussed, from a very high level. Higher revenue, right? That could probably also be one of the cases or business case that a privacy professional makes in terms of getting that management support or buy-in for their privacy program or privacy tool implementation as well. Right, you definitely need that kind of management support to implement an organizational wide tool, especially because of the number of integrations that tool has to go through, right? So you'll definitely need that management support. Okay, I see that a lot of people are choosing higher revenue and enhancing consumer experience as well, but all of the above still remains the popular choice. So Rahul, I'll hand it over to you again. If you could, walk us through the benefits of a privacy-centric approach.
Sure, Krishna. So I think From a user and an organization viewpoint, specifically like when we're talking about, let's say, advertisement, and again, coming back to the point whether it is creepy or crappy. So, the organizations will try to make the advertisements more relevant. However, when they use privacy as something which is inherent, or they have built it as part of their design philosophy, and that's the privacy-centric approach you're talking about. That gives user more confidence when and imposes more trust in that particular brand, and that's why we see on how different kind of advertising campaigns have used or leveraged privacy over the years. If you remember the OLX ad, they used to hide or mask numbers, and they said that the other user can't see your number unless the transaction is done. Or, for example, Apple with this large page advertisements on why privacy is centric to their business model, and how that becomes a brand differentiator for them. And that you will see various segments of privacy being practiced and then advocated through marketing campaigns by large companies. So it definitely, as we get more and more digitized, privacy will become has to be like centric to the organization's approach towards data governance, and they need to advertise it also properly. So it will definitely become like a competitive advantage, or to outweigh or competitor in terms of providing better services which are more privacy preserving. It will definitely increase, as you say, like the brand reputation. And once user has more trust on your platforms, that you're not selling my data, that you're not misusing the data for other purposes, so then obviously you will see rising revenues for your business as well.
Right. So Rahul, I'll just quickly go over these section as well on how can an advertising company become privacy centric. So I think whenever we start with the privacy program or we talk a lot about privacy, we usually say that there needs to be an awareness session, because a lot of people do not really understand that data privacy is a whole different concept altogether. In retrospect, it's not just a subset of cybersecurity. It's not even related. It's a whole different concept. Cybersecurity is something that, of course, supports your privacy initiatives. But in the end, you have to look at privacy from a perspective that it is about providing rights to the people, as well as preventing harms that may come out of your processing activities as an organization.
Yeah, I would like to talk on a couple of modules, or I would say two pieces that form the important aspect when it comes to in terms of managing a privacy program. The way how Exterro look at the smart data inventory or data inventories, we see this as the foundation of any organization, or maybe the we call it as the basement of any building, right? So we see this as the foundation of a privacy program or for any organization. So the way how our inventory differs with our competitors is we are not just asking you, sending the questionnaires and ask participants to fill and get information from them, because it's a very hectic process, a very time consuming one when it comes to getting information. And also we cannot be very sure, 100% sure that whatever the information that you get from different departments is going to be 100% accurate. So we have created very recently, Exterro, we have launched our smart data inventory that helps you in building a defensible privacy program. So we have another piece of software called data discovery. So most of you are all privacy professionals, you know what data discovery does. So our data discovery platform scans, crawls, and understands the type of the data that sits in different data sources. It could be a structured data source or unstructured, on-prem, off-prem, it could be anything. So our system has the capability to scan, crawl, and understand the type of the data, and it understands the PII and it classifies and pushes back into the data inventory. To talk about this case, I would like to touch upon an example that we solved, or the use case that we solved for a major bank in one of the major banks across the globe. So they were retaining tons of data without knowing what they need to retain, what they need to get rid of. And it's all physical records, it's all papers. So we help them, our retention, library, data retention software, help them in integrating with the physical box storage device, just informing them, connecting with the regulation, what they need to get rid of. Within a matter of 9 months, their annual spend before purchasing or procuring Exterro's data retention was about 12M or 11.5M US dollars per year. Within a matter of 9 months, we were able to bring down their spend from 11.5M to 3M. Krishna, I guess it's good for considering the time. I guess it's good to.
Yeah, Raj, I think you were right on time there. So really appreciate that. And thank you for that crisp information as well. Okay, perfect. I think we are probably right on time as well. I would like to thank you, Rahul and Raj. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for sharing your insights. And I think a lot of people could take out a lot of information from the session we had today, and you would probably receive messages on LinkedIn as well. So hope you can also, attain to that as well. So just would leave to the two of you if you want to give your vote of thanks to the attendees who've joined us today. So I think we'll go with Rahul first. Rahul.
So thank you, Tsaaro and Exterro, for conducting this. It's, I think, great questions, great interaction by the audience. And as Krishna mentioned, that if you have additional questions, reach out to the team, reach out to us on LinkedIn, and we can take it forward from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Rahul. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Tsaaro team, for having us here. And again, thanks to my company, Exterro, for nominating me to be a part of this webinar. And thanks to everyone who organized this. Thanks to the attendees. And we'd be very happy to answer any of your questions. If you have any, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or any other means. Thank you.
Thank that. And thank you, everyone.